and Hammerstein said.
Okay, recording it in case anybody has any desire for this madness.
Oh, fantastic. Hi, good morning, bonjour, welcome to my pool. I'm Joey Stocks, and I am a fitful writer, designer, storyteller, performer, and editor. Welcome to our viewers. Hi, we finally made it. Sorry to keep you hanging.
Hi, everybody.
Everything in this world is changing so quickly that I want to let our viewers know that there's a lot we want to cover today. We've received many questions in advance, so we'll be giving priority to those questions that are about the world in general. If there's time at the end, we'll take personal questions as our two guests see fit. And our guests today are Graciela Asher and Heather Carlucci. Hi.
Hello. Hi, everybody.
I'm so happy to see you at my pool.
Wildly festive.
In fact, I've got, it's very loud. The pool is very, very loud. Kids, can you turn that down? Thanks. I don't know about y'all, but I was just starting to say this, but I frequently struggle with how I identify myself in situations like this. In fact, the one sentence that I wrote for myself today, I rewrote several times. I did mention I'm an editor. It is a burden sometimes. But I'm still not entirely comfortable with my self-description. I feel like it changes depending on the context, of course. But then usually what I do is I go with words that describe me right now and what I hope to be, rather than looking back to the past. So I was just asking you at the other pool, I'm gonna ask you at this one since there's so many people around who are dying to know. What words do you use to describe yourself right this minute? Graciela, would you start?
Yes, sure. So I am currently sunbathing and I am a Reiki master. I am an intuitive masseuse. I am a ceremonialist. I am an activist, and I like the deep end of the pool.
Excellent. My pool only has a deep end, as you can see. It's quite deep. So I'm here for that. Heather, would you jump in?
Hello. I am a psychic medium and a medical intuitive. And I will add, and thank you for bringing this up, Graciela, I am also an activist, a long-time activist, and a mother. I'm a single mom, proudly. Not that there's a choice in the matter at the moment. We're stuck in the house together. And I'm a writer as well. And I love a pool party. I cannot deny it. I freaking love a pool party. So, that's gonna go on my tombstone.
I love it.
Pool party.
Nothing else, just that.
That's it.
It sums it up.
Who cares after that?
Yeah, like you can just bury me in the pool.
Sure. It's good.
It's easy, just toss me in. Just float around for a while. Sounds good. Thank you for that. I appreciate that. Well, there are lots of words there. I want your guidance here. I want you to tell me. There are, in the way that people sometimes struggle to identify certain aspects of work, I find that there are those collective nouns, and then there are the very specific nouns. And I'm interested in this because my place of employment is the Dramatists Guild of America. Over 100 years ago, when they were forming, because the organization is for all theater writers, so that includes playwrights, it includes composers, it includes lyricists, and it includes librettists. They decided that was going to be a really lengthy title, and that they needed one word to sum it up. So they reached back and grabbed a word, sort of an archaic, out of use word, dramatist, which if you look it up in the dictionary, it's just a synonym for playwright. But nobody ever uses it anymore. I mean, it's a weird word. It's a weird word to say. It's a weird word to hear. But they decided, hey, we're just going to co-opt that word, and we're going to use it as the collective noun for all theater writers. So they just sort of grabbed it, and I am fascinated by that structure and that sort of manipulation of language. And so I'm wondering, do you identify collectively as light workers? And if so, can you walk me through? I feel like that is maybe one of those collective nouns. Can you walk me through what you think a light worker is? Anybody, jump in. Water's fine.
Want me to jump in? Can I?
Yeah.
To me, a light worker, I think, is anybody who works with energy. It's such a big blanketed term. It's a term actually most people don't really know. And I think anybody who, and I want to make sure it's separate of just using tools that sort of make you feel better in your own wellness. But I think people who really realize their capacity for reading energy, feeling energy, moving energy, anything that falls under that, and it could be anything. You know, there are plenty of people who use tarot cards who just read the cards, and it has nothing to do with energy. And then there are those who, as I watch them, I'm like, you don't even need those cards. Like, you're just reading almost just to have the cards, right? Something to do in the process, or the way it gets going for you. It's the ignition. So for me, that's how I value that term, because it sort of brings us all together in a way that other terms don't. Because and it took me a really long time to come up with what words I needed to use for myself on a professional level.
Yeah, do you find they change?
At the moment, no. But I could add more to it. I just don't use them professionally.
Yeah, oh, well, same, you know, yeah, I decided to,
right,
I edited out
things, right?
Yeah, I edited out things like, you know, son, uncle, brother. I mean, who cares?
Yeah, you know, inevitably that's going to come up. But yeah, I think for me, like, you know, other people will call me other things quite a bit, you know, but I sort of stick to that at the moment.
Yeah.
I think that's a great definition of light worker. I definitely resonate. I feel like I should take off my, I think it's getting a little shady. I could.
The sun has gone on the cloud.
Yeah, for me, definitely also like light worker equals working with energy. And also specifically because for me, it's like working with someone who works with energy for, you know, I guess the greater collective on, I guess literally the more like lighter side of it, because everything is energy, and energy doesn't necessarily always have to be light or dark, but it just is. But for me, people that are light workers work with energy for the specific like greater good, and with the best intentions of
definitely.
Yeah, I love that. I love that. Yeah, it's so interesting to me then under the umbrella of light worker, how many, like the dazzling array of diversity under that, just diversity of terminology, and how people identify and how people read energy. And on that note, will you all, Graciela, I'm going to start with you. Will you tell us your origin story? And by that, I mean your origin as a light worker.
Oh, I was like, boo, I don't know if we have enough time for that. Yes. How is my light worker birth? I would say it started in around, Actually, it started on my journey to find my mother, so my biological mother, which is interesting. So I was actually adopted. I was born in Colombia, and I was raised in Long Island with a white Jewish family. And it was wonderful, and and all the things. It was all the things. And at one point, I really started to look within and be like, well, you know what? Like I feel like something is missing, and I feel like I need a piece to find, not only a physical piece, but like a PEACE piece myself. And so I went to Colombia, and I was, you know, kind of amazed how easy my journey was to actually connect with my biological mom. And from that, it kind of catapulted me into a place of more searching, of kind of trying to find all of my pieces. And within that, I found myself in Portugal. I kind of went all over the world, and I found myself in Portugal. And I was working at a hostel. I didn't have any money. And I saw an ad. I didn't know what Reiki was, but my spirit was like, you need to do that. You need to do that. And I had no zero clue about what that word meant, but it was just like something about it. You had to do that. I had no money because I was living and working for free, basically. I was working in a hostel for exchange of room and board. And so I reached out to this person that had the ad and was like, I don't know what this is, but I have to do it. And they kind of were like, okay, well, actually you do. Like, they felt it too. They were also a light worker, and they were like, well, you know what? Yes, actually, you're supposed to be here. And they had me do the whole course. So I went from Reiki level 1 within, we did it over a certain amount of months, and then to Reiki 3 and 4. And then I was like, okay. And I kept on going, and it awokened all of this that was inside of me that I didn't even know was there. I always wanted to help people since I was a little girl. Like, I was always making these scenes and playing with my dolls, like I'm coming to your rescue, and like I'm gonna help you, and like helping the world and serving the community. And I called myself Mini Mother Teresa, and like my parents didn't really like that because they were like, wait, we're Jewish. So but I always had this aspect of myself to help, and I did that in many different ways. But now it was like, wait, what is this energy? And when I started realizing that we all have this energy and this power inside of us to not only heal others, but to first heal ourselves. And even in the process of me getting trained as a Reiki master, it was to first use that energy to heal yourself. And that was a huge part of my healing journey. And so then I started and kept on going, and one thing kind of led into another and into another. And I started to realize that I was an intuitive, and I always was, but I didn't have a word for it. Everybody was just like, oh, she just knows things, and I didn't know that there was this whole world. And as I slowly started to dive deeper, especially into my roots, I always had a calling for indigenous culture, always. And I didn't know why. And as I kept on diving, I started to dive into plant medicine, all different kinds of plant medicines and ceremonies. And with that, I really started to awaken my inner medicine woman. And so I started to really dive into that and get connected to different medicines like cacao and mushrooms and ayahuasca and all of these other things that I started to add to what I do in my practice, and started to hold ceremonies of my own, and be guided and led by beautiful teachers that I met along the way. And that's kind of how I came here.
I love that. Thank you for sharing that. I've got 1,000 questions that just flashed across my brain while you were saying that.
Yeah, me too.
Before I dive into that, though, let's go with that impulse then. Heather, do you have any questions based
Yeah,
on?
I actually do. I was wondering, Graciela, did you find that a lot of the first indigenous medicine work that you did and had to do with like your background, your heritage, your gene pool, for that matter, actually?
Actually, yeah, that's an interesting question. So the first medicines that I really connected with were in a deep way is cacao, and cacao comes from actually like comes back from the Amazon, and then it has migrated up, north, and it definitely is in Colombia, but it isn't necessarily a part of like the culture like it is in Mexico or Guatemala, different places like that. But it definitely does grow there, and but it's not in the same ceremonial way used as it is in other cultures and places. Um, I also then connected very deeply with ayahuasca, which is also have in the indigenous communities in Colombia. They definitely have ceremonies with ayahuasca, with it's called the grandmother medicine. I don't currently serve ayahuasca, but she has definitely helped me in my journey for sure.
Can you tell us just a little bit? So this is piggybacking on what Heather just asked. Can you tell us specifically, for those of us who don't know, what exactly is cacao and how do you use it in your ceremony?
Yeah, of course. So cacao is what we actually would know as chocolate. It is the original raw form of chocolate. And so that means that it doesn't have any milk and it doesn't have any sugar. So it's pretty bitter, but it's that good bitter. It's like, most things that are good for us are actually not super sweet. And it has a ton of antioxidants. It has theobromine, which is a distant cousin of caffeine. It has and which kind of uplifts our spirit. And a lot of us are in our minds all the time. So this is beautiful medicine that takes us out of our minds and really helps us drop into our hearts. It has a huge level of magnesium, which is part of the reasons why it helps us relax and calm down and get out of our minds. At the same time, it helps the theobromine elevates our spirit. So it's this beautiful, unique balance of being in your heart and releasing a lot of those walls and barriers that we carry to protect ourselves and have been trained to do so within the human experience. And then it really just helps. It's almost, they call it the mother medicine because it kind of, you feel like you're being held, like you feel like you finally have permission to feel. And a lot of us block ourselves from that so much. And this beautiful medicine is subtle. It's not a psychedelic, just to make that clear. And it you can add it works pretty well with other medicines as well, like mushrooms and even just like rose or other herbs. It can blend really nicely with as well. So I use that a lot in my ceremonies, and we drink this hot brew. So it's hot and it's like a hot chocolate. It was the original hot chocolate. And because of colonialism, when the Europeans came to invade, they started also seeing how, especially the Mayans and the Aztecs would use this beautiful medicine, and they started taking it. It was so bitter, like they would like spit it out, and they were like, "Oh my God!" But they saw that it gave these people a certain type of demeanor, and they could sense that there was some goodness in it. So they started to take it, but they started to add the sugars and the milk to sweeten it down so that they wouldn't like barfing it up. And so we honor the medicine, we talk to it, just like we were saying before, like about energy. I believe everything is energy. So the more that we actually connect and talk to our beverage, in this particular case, cacao, it has its own energy. And the more that we direct that energy and with an intention, especially when we're in a group ceremony with other people, that energy magnifies. And so it's able to amplify whatever we're putting into this medicine, and we feel the effect even grander and greater.
That's so cool. That is so cool. Thank you for explaining that. That's
awesome.
great. I'm super interested in knowing even more. But before we do, Heather, would you walk us through your origin story as a light worker?
Sure. I have to think about that. I've always been able to, I guess, do the work ever since I was really small. It started really knowing two things. It started knowing people's physical health, whether it was by way of conversation, you know, hearing the aunts talk about somebody being ill, me already knowing what was wrong with them, or even sitting next to somebody and sort of understanding what was going on with their bodies. And of course, as a very young person, as a child, you don't have walls as to, well, am I right, am I wrong? It just is. And the other thing, which was very clear to me early on, if I have to sort of divide up, you know, because I think once you open yourself up in your own light worker presence, you realize we all have many things that we do, but more than anything, it was hearing and seeing spirits and being able to sort of interact. And when, I guess the first time I realized I had it was when I realized other people did not. How I best can describe it. Because you're just who you are, and you assume everybody is sort of having the same experience until you find out otherwise. I didn't really do much with it beyond it sort of, because, you know, nobody has a great most people don't have a great reaction to, you know, being there and saying what you see and what you hear and what you know. And then I went about my life. I was a chef for 30 years. And then at some point I couldn't really hold back anymore. It was bigger than me. And I realized that just the experience of just being on the earth made it more powerful. Just sort of living and being. It wasn't anything studied. It wasn't anything like that. Now I'll do a little bit more work because I have a much more direct, you know, directive. But when I was ready to start doing things professionally, I felt I was past what I thought I was. And it was due to a couple of very dear friends, one of which was, he came up last night in a group reading I did, which was shocking to me because somebody else there actually knew him, was a doctor I used to go to named Dr. Eran Jausan, and he picked it up in me one day while I was in his office, and he was like, you have to start doing this work. And we talked, being a chef, he did a lot of work with food as medicine anyway, but he knew so many different techniques and practices from, you know, throughout time, really. He understood things, he spoke many languages, he had sort of a sense of energy and people and how we communicate through everything. And he was the one who, I was very sick for many years with chronic illnesses, and he was the one who was like, if you can work on yourself and start doing all the right things for your body, you're not going to be able to deny what it is that you have and who you are. And subsequently, that's exactly what happened. And so now I've just been only doing this, I guess it's been 5 years now, maybe a little bit longer.
Yeah. Can you tell us your coming out moment, or what that's like for you? It may not be a moment, it may be a process.
Oh, no,
it was for me, speaking as a gay man, but I'm wondering how that is as a light worker.
I think one of the things that was really big for me, and I was always really nervous about it, was, you know, my life as a chef, I was so much part of my identity, which also means that major part of my identity was my ego. So I knew I could not do this work properly with ego, because I see a lot of people that have that, and I can always see it, and I always call it, and I'm always like, you know, we're all humans, but if you have to step into the room without the ego, without the judgment, which is not easy, because we have those two things to protect ourselves as humans on the earth. But it was a point in which a friend of mine who was very, very overtly enthusiastic about me stopping lying to myself and doing this formally, and he passed suddenly. And you know, as the movie goes, that's always when you have your big moment, because they died, right? And I sat down one day after his memorial service on my bed in the middle of the night, opened up my laptop and made my own website and posted it to Facebook, that I was announcing that I was, you know, a medium and medical intuitive, and for me, it was a big deal, because Facebook is largely just my family and every chef in the world.
Yeah.
I had a very lucky and affluent career for many, many years, and I was like, click. It was very.
Yeah, well, changing your relationship status on Facebook, right? It's like,
right.
Boom, everybody knows.
I know, it's shocking. And this one really, you know, this is also pre-Instagram, so it's a whole other thing. But it really, I went to bed, it's got more scared than excited, because I was like, oh my God, what are people going to think of me? Which shocked me, because I don't usually care what people think of me. That's not one of my things. It's probably one of my issues. Yeah. But that was my big coming out moment.
Yeah, well, I mean, so let's talk about the fear part though, because I'm curious about that. So if you don't normally care what other people think, why was that something that made you fearful?
Because it was really showing myself.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I could walk into a kitchen, I knew I had the skills, I knew I had the dynamic, I knew I had the clout. You know, I had all the shallow stuff. I had all the press, I had all the awards, whatever. And it only meant that I'm a really good cook. Anybody could do it, right? And in the big picture of it, you know, I mean, I'm glad in the last 3 weeks that I'm this good of a cook, because I haven't cooked like this since I was paid for it. The amount that I have to, but I think releasing that it was such a security blanket. Because what was I without that guard up of just being like, I mean, anybody tell me something about yourself, chef was the first thing out of my mouth. It was 24/7. It was, it brings out every addictive personality in any person, because it's the hours, it's the competition, it's the ego, it's the everything, you know, you party hard, you work hard. And then I wasn't doing it anymore.
Yeah.
Hard. It's sometimes I still think I'm going through withdrawal, because I don't have 50 human people around me in any one time begging for my attention or needing my help. And now I'm sort of like relieved, and I'm also like, where is everybody? I see a lot of dead people, but I don't really see a lot of live people.
There are more of them than us.
Yeah, exactly. Although I'll tell you, you get a bunch of prep cooks around you and you really feel like Custer at his last stand for sure.
You know, it's interesting. I hadn't thought about this until just this minute. And as you were talking, Heather, that one of the things that connects, that's similar between all three of us, is that we all consider ourselves and are actually in positions of service.
Yeah, absolutely.
And you know, I love being of service, and in my job at the Dramatists Guild, I love it so much that I think, just hearing you both talk, I think that that's probably that I tend to. I mean, I really love it. So no complaints here. This is not a complaint. But I so love being of service, and I love being of service to writers, because if I had to have heroes in this world, they would be artists and writers. Typically, they fall into those two categories. But the words that I chose to describe myself today were writer, designer instead of artist, which is a curious substitution for myself. I'll think about that later, not online. Storyteller, performer, but I find that I typically don't spend much time doing those things because my employment takes so much of my time, happily so, but it takes so much of my time that I don't end up either having time or making time, really. I'm in control, making time to do those other things that I just described myself as. So they're almost more aspirational than they are actual. And but what I have found is that when I do make time for those words that I used to describe myself today, my capacity to be of better service in my employment goes
That's
up.
a really good point.
Oh, definitely.
Yeah.
Right?
That's a really good point. Yeah.
Graciela, I'm going to come back because I'm all about some specificity at the moment. So you were talking in your origin story, you were talking about your way in was through Reiki. Again, for those of us who don't know much about Reiki, could you walk us through what Reiki is and then how you connect with it?
Yeah, sure. So Reiki is one of the many energy modalities. So I believe that most of us can agree that energy is everywhere. Literally everything is made up of it. And that's why I'm a big advocate to say that everybody is an energy worker in some way or another, whether we're aware of it and like channeling cognizantly that energy to do something. We're all working with energy all the time. So Reiki is one of the modalities. It's a Japanese specific modality, and so it's basically I channel that energy with certain symbols, certain like chants, certain things to kind of call that energy in, and then it basically comes out through my hands. And since I believe that we are all energy, there are certain energy centers in each of our bodies. And working with Reiki specifically, and there's other, like I said, other energy modalities, basically what we do is we help to energetically balance those energies. So I think of it like this. Like if there's a big giant divine waterfall, there's like this big giant divine waterfall of energy that's basically coming into all of our bodies from the top and trickling all the way down. When we come into this universe, when we're babies, we're completely open. We're like just a giant open waterfall, no blockages. And then somewhere along the way, we have this human experience and we have trauma. We have all different kinds of stuff that happen to us in our lives. And then we slowly start to form these like energetic boulders. And they might start out as these little pebbles. And and kind of, the energetic waterfall has to like do little matrix waves around these pebbles. And then if they aren't addressed, that these energetic blocks get bigger and bigger and denser. And they start out as energy outside of our physical body. And then once we don't address them, like I said, they get denser, and then they eventually show up in our physical bodies as dis-ease. So it's pretty much dis-ease from that energetic flow. Mm-hmm. So when that energetic flow is stopped, then it is blocks, and then it starts to connect to different parts of our body, our mental body, our physical body, our energetic body, our spiritual body, and it shows up in many different ways. So the Reiki energy is used to really clear that energetic blocks that we usually see it manifesting physically, and we don't, sometimes even the doctors, they're like, I don't know what is really going on, because they're not dealing with the whole person. We are not the physical. A big part of us is our energetic body, our energetic self. And if we don't deal with that side of us, then we're not gonna fully get rid of the physical thing that we are, or ailment, if you will, that we're experiencing. So when, as a Reiki practitioner, Reiki master, I deal first with that, the energetic level that we don't physically see, and to clear out a lot of that, those blocks and those like energetic pebbles and boulders, as I say. Yeah. And so the energy can flow freely, and it can loosen up, and we can release a lot of stuff that we didn't even know that we're holding on to. A lot of our pain that we physically are feeling isn't like knee pain, isn't just there's something wrong with your knee. That could be signalizing something completely else, like shame, blame, anger, all of these different things we hold in our physical bodies. So it helps to kind of clear away energetically that first, and then we can actually deal with the physical aspect. And sometimes, depending, if we might be able to release those physical ailments through the Reiki, and we won't even need to deal with the physical aspect of it.
Yeah, yeah. Heather, do you as I know that you're medical intuitive, that aspect of what you do, does any of that resonate?
Oh gosh, completely. I mean, when I read, also, like, it comes out of me very medical, like very Western doctor words that even mostly I don't even know a good part of the time. But like, I'll rarely say any, just because it's just the way it happens to come out of me in relating to another person. Like, I won't ever use chakras or anything like that, because it's just, for whatever reason, it's not the way it processes in my brain, in my sensory, anything. But inevitably, when I'm working on somebody and we're talking about an ailment that they have, or I also see it ahead, it always connects with another problem, a blockage of energy, depending on the trauma, depending on the current situation. And then also I also read where the trauma sits in their DNA and where it was brought, because there's present life DNA, like the DNA we get from our parents, and then there's past life DNA. And you can really pick it apart. What I love about doing that work is that when you're really working with somebody, and even if they don't necessarily believe the process, and maybe out of desperation they end up with me because they're like, if I didn't, my wife was going to kill me, kind of thing. Even when it's very easy to sort of, I would say, like, give proof of belief when we're talking about DNA, because it's issues I would never know about their parents or their grandparents or their great-grandparents. But what's amazing is that inevitably when we talk about past life DNA, it will always click with the person. Even if they have no sense of past lives, they don't understand really that energy is bigger than what we believe in, ideally, in this culture. Because funny thing is, first thing we learn in Science 101, walking to like third grade science, and like, energy never dies. And yet people still can't quite take it to the next level. And especially when it comes to their bodies, which is nothing but, basically like we're electricity head to toe all the time.
Right. Otherwise,
you could take us apart, put us back together, and we'd be the same. So that's one of the things that I love about it. And yeah, it's the exact same sort of definition that I would use, Graciela would say. It's like where it comes from, how we hold it in our bodies. For me, what I'll do is sort of find out where the entrapment is, which is where we hold trauma, we hold pain, and then I work from there.
Yeah, as a former dancer, I certainly understand muscle memory, and I think that ties into what we're talking about here. That's a powerful muscle memory if you carry it from life to life with you. Wow, I mean, that's really something to consider.
It is. It's amazing.
For a lay person like me, that's really like, oh my God. So I need to be real careful with what I'm doing now, because I might be taking that with me.
Well, ideally, we try to sort of work through our own issues life through life. We don't always have those lives, but ideally, I think we surely do. what I think is really amazing, and I think you and I have had this conversation before, is that two things that read very similarly are sickle cell anemia and Tay-Sachs syndrome, right? Ashkenazi Jew, African Americans, right? And of course they manifest differently, but they're both autosomal. They both resonate when I read it. One comes from the slavery of Egypt and the other one comes from the slavery of here.
Wow.
Just how deeply it resonates in the body, it totally vibrates the same level.
That's
And to me, I'm like, well, that doesn't prove something. I don't know what does.
Yeah, right.
As being the reader of it, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Wow. That's very interesting. I'm going to shift gears here. Well, actually, before I do, because I want to be mindful of our time. So how, given our strange circumstances here by the pool, and by the pool, I mean our homes. How are you all doing, but make it specific to the work that you would normally do when we're not all in this mandatory lockdown? Graciela, would you start, since you're the one who works, I mean, in such a physical way?
Yeah, I haven't been able to do what I normally do, how I normally do it. And one of the great things about this whole dynamic, if you will, experience is I feel like it's really pushing us to be creative as we can. You know, like even like this, like whoever knew we would have a pool party. You know. So I think that there are definitely great things that I personally feel the universe is like pushing all of us, like go, the time is now. And all of the boundaries and the borders that we might have put on ourselves, including in our work, it's just like boom, like they just like exploded. And so now it's like, okay, well, how do you like how can you work without any like boundaries, except you can't physically see people? So I have been offering online ceremonies, doing more distant Reiki. I've been teaching now more so since I also do intuitive massage and Thai yoga massage. So I've been doing more teaching self massage and teaching people acupressure points. And so I feel another part of this whole dynamic, I'm going to call it dynamic because a lot of people are, oh my God, it's so crazy. And I'm like, no, it's just dynamic. Like, it's just because there are goods and are bads to it. You know, it's all of the things. And I think that it is pushing me personally to find ways to really help empower others within this work. And so that was always my experience. I always want to make sure that people feel empowered. Like, I don't feel like there's anything really much different for me than anyone else. And I feel that we can all heal ourselves and heal our bodies. And yes, definitely there are different levels to it, but I feel that with this experience that I want to give as much information for people to be able to empower them with their own knowledge and their own body and to really tune into themselves. So I've been just empowering people and showing them how to do that in different ways through distance, but it's still able to get them on board with tuning into themselves. And even being in isolation is great for that because we have nowhere to go. So it's like you're pretty much with yourself all the time, whether you want to or not. And that could be devastating for some. That can be like a big sigh of relief for others. And but I feel like we have so many distractions normally. Our bodies are trying to tell us things all the time. and we don't listen. So now I feel like the whole universe is like on a giant, what I'm calling a divine pause, and saying, okay, now not only for you, but obviously for the earth, this is how we need to just take a moment and really get to know ourselves better. And so I think just providing people with tools to do so. And finally, many people that always thought that I was just a quack, always thought that I was crazy and all of this, they're like calling me, Graciela, what was that herb that you told me to take, that oil? Like, and I also teach Kundalini yoga. So people are like, wait, you know that breath thing that you were doing, like, what is that? Like, so, you know, and they're like, what is an aura? Like, I think I need to strengthen mine. Like, so all these things are coming up that I think if we weren't in these circumstances, people would still continue to just brush like all the light workers, if you will, or most of us just over and be like, oh, that all that woo-woo-ness. And now I feel like a lot of people are listening to us in a deeper way than they might have before, and taking us more serious. At least that's my experience.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree. People are reaching out to me that would have never reached out to me before. Definitely. Luckily, I can work. Half of my work was online anyway. I mean, I think there's a lot of amends that had to sort of go, like amending had to go on. Like, obviously, I'm not going to charge what I usually charge. And I've always done a lot of pro bono work. And that sort of continues. I think though, it's funny because the energy of the world is so different. When I read now, it's shifted to like, you know, it's almost like the materials you use to work, right? If you're a painter, you use paint. And for me, we use energy. So that's been really very different. What's also been interesting is that, and Graciela, I'm curious what your experience is. I think a lot of people who are light workers felt and knew something was coming. And whether it was just a feeling you had physically, or messages or images, or an understanding that not only could not things go on as they were, but that they literally had to stop in the immediate. And also, what I think is fascinating, and this really hit me last week, we are witnessing actual evolution. Oh, yeah. Like, we sort of look at what evolution is to us. It could be like the Neanderthals or the Cro-Mags, right? And we sort of like, we're like, well, they probably didn't even feel it because, you know, you can't always feel what evolution is, right? Because it takes so long. But we're really, through the things that we hear about, you know, something being wiped out because of disease and we not knowing why. We just knew, ideally, whatever anthropological, you know, scientists were teaching us, but we're witnessing it firsthand in many, many ways. And I think that's going to be, there's more of a real fleshing out of nature at this point. And I think that's one of the things that it goes beyond like the term health and wellness. It's like the people who really have their feet, like, and understand that the term feet on the ground is bigger than just being like a person who's aware of another person in the room. But I think we're really going to sort of see how things go. And I think there is going to be a realization about people's own humanity. That's going to hit really hard. My only well, I have many concerns. It's not my only concern. My big concern, obviously, is how we're going to shift into it. Because when we sit here and we talk, like the three of us here and whoever's been watching and that kind of thing, we all have a certain sensibility, and not everybody has that sensibility. So it's really going to be, I think we're seeing the shift now. I don't think we can even conceive of what's going to happen over the next, I feel like, 2 years. We have no idea. Yeah. Maybe 50 years.
It's a huge, I love that. It's a huge evolution. I mean, you know, many people are in the light worker community. We've been hearing like, oh, we're going into 5G, like, you know, like not 5G, 5D, sorry.
Right, all right, yeah.
Yeah, and not that really many of us really have a conception of what that is, but we just know that there's something, like the question that you were saying, like, oh yeah, did I feel it coming? Yes, like I felt it. I didn't know what, like that's the thing. I didn't know what was coming, but I knew I had to be prepared. I knew that I kept on telling my friends, like, I was like, I feel like I have to be a warrior. Like, and I didn't know what I was fighting necessarily.
Yeah.
But I did feel this warrior spirit really hard. And I got a message actually to start to go and honor other warriors that have came before us. So I got this message that I needed to go every 4 days to Harriet Tubman's. There's a statue of her on 125th Street here in New York City. And I just would go and I would pray to her. I would sing to her. And I felt that like warrior spirit, like there's something coming and we have to get ready. And her energy started coming to me. Other, you know, warriors that came before us. It was like I could do 20 push-ups now. Like I started like physically. I don't know what this is, but I'm gonna be ready, you know. And and a big thing was for me, I needed to be at my optimal level. So I started detoxing like crazy. I'm sure that you've seen my celery juice videos, and I was just like, okay. And another message was like, yes, warrior, but also don't lose the humor, like, because there is going to be something coming and it's going to be devastating. I didn't know what it was, but it's really important that we continue to like keep our wits and our humor about us, because it's whatever it is going to be really dense. So we need to stay in the light and just continue to bring that joy to others. And it's really important now, I think, than ever, really.
I think the term dense is perfect. Thank you for that. It is dense. It is, you know, it's overwhelming and it's dense to the best of us.
Yeah, yeah, and you know, as you were talking, I'm so glad that you mentioned humor, because it's the thing that I keep coming back to. You know, there are some people I hear talking, people even my age and older, which I find surprising, mostly straight people, who talk about how this is such an unprecedented issue that we have, and while undoubtedly this is presenting and affecting people in a way that other things in our recent history have not. There are some really close correlations between this particular virus and the AIDS epidemic.
Absolutely.
And I mentioned that, not to get on my soapbox about that necessarily, but to tie back into your comment about humor. For so many of us who lived through that time, humor was one of the tools, one of the weapons we had in our arsenal for dealing with that time, when it was really bad. Not that that time is over, because it isn't. It's still with us. There's still no cure. Well, I just want to acknowledge that. However, it is not the same as it was in, say, 1987 or 1991, or you know what I mean.
Yeah. No, I think that's huge, and I think it's one of the things that, you know, I think this in many ways, people who are marginalized are not surprised by any of this. Right, how it's being handled, especially in this country. You know, I think nobody is surprised when this whole thing first started. I realized that I was very triggered. I had lost as a child. I grew up around in the LGBTQ community, and every week was, if you hadn't seen somebody in a while, you knew why. And it went on for, I remember the intensity, it was like a good 5 years. And then there was nobody left after a while. to ask about. And that is one of the things I think a few weeks ago, I was like, oh, there's something else going on with me. And it was fear, it was panic, and it was like, oh gosh, that's what that is. That is so what that is. And
remembering from that time.
Right. And the fact that people are shocked by the way it's being handled, I'm like, this isn't surprising. It always comes down to grassroots community to make things work and make things, as far as care and support goes, it's always grassroots community when it comes to this country, period. Because it's the only thing that's going to make it through. It's sticking with your community.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and obviously one of the big differences is that this virus, the coronavirus, is much more transmittable than,
Yes.
More easily transmittable than the AIDS virus is. Anyway, blah, blah, blah. But what I wanted to ask you specifically is, what is it about the energy of humor that helps us in situations like this?
I think Graciela froze, actually.
Oh yeah.
Speaking of humor, Graciela froze. I'm gonna because I don't know how people's time is, but I've always been fascinated by comedy, because it really is so based on the, if you see somebody get up on a stage to do stand-up comedy, it's all about the transfers of energy from one person to another.
Yes.
It is in some way a light worker, because it is somebody who is going in there, finding out what gets that reaction of the body is so obscure. We know automatically what gives pain and sorrow and even calm, but laughter and that kind of humor and joy, it's magic. It's magic. It's literally like magic in the big word.
Yeah, yeah, I find it interesting because I love that you just connected that with stand-up comedy, because I had never thought about it before. Certainly I understand it as a performer, but I never did stand-up comedy. But I do know what it's like as a performer. Particularly, I have to say the part where I feel the most connected to what you just said is when hi, you're back.
I'm back.
Is
my
that
phone overheated. Sorry.
When I would walk on stage, whenever I walk on stage, you definitely know that the energy of the room, and you're gauging without thinking about it, and it's not a conscious thought with me, it never has been, but you're gauging what's the energy of the piece that I'm presenting, and how is that going to meet this energy, and how can I introduce that and change the energy of the room, right? That it's not just that it's the meeting of those things, but that as the performer, you're going to go in and really change that energy. And I think that that's probably more, to your point, Heather, more easily discussed through a comedian. Yes, people are showing up with that idea of, okay, make me laugh. I've had a shitty day, make me laugh. I've had a great day, make me laugh. It's the make me laugh challenge, right? And it is a bit of a challenge, and to feel that energy as you walk in, and then flip it so that they're no longer feeling that they're challenging you, but that they're with you, right?
That's right, right. Oh, there's a documentary out called Dying Laughing, and it only is about, I think it's 100 comics of all different types and levels and everything, talking about the actual work.
Yeah.
And I've watched it so many times now, because when I watched it the first time, I was like, yes, those are light workers. They get up there, they have to move energy in the room. And not only that, but they can go in and focus on one person, exchange the thing that might make that person, laugh, give them joy, make them rethink, which is what we do.
Yeah.
And then move it around the room.
And
I think that is one of the key things about it. And I think also when we, on a different note, when we deal with death, passing over, transitioning, with some sort of sense of the humor and joy that person was when they were here in this life experiencing, we open ourselves up to the possibility of what passing over is. you know, because if you've ever had a laugh at a funeral, it is so deep, it is so intense, it's never a light chuckle. It is the kind of laugh that you almost fall off your seat, right?
Mm-hmm.
It really is. And I think we have to sort of remember that, because I mean, when I read, I never see that anybody actually dies. The energy moves out and goes on to the next. And our pain is physical. It's not so much spiritual, it is physical. That's why we have to go through that grieving. And when we realize we put together something like we're going through now, and I think, you know, I've lost people in this already, and more people will. And we're all from New York City, so we're really sort of sitting at a really tough time. We realize that like the shift is different, and that we can look at each other and remember that person or our situation and be like, if I don't release this, and it may be laughter that you release it, it could be running 100 miles. It could be sweating your brains out for no good reason, right? It could be drinking, and then, you know, who knows? But I think humor is one of the most purging things when it comes to any sort of down to the wire feeling that we may have.
Yeah.
I think feeling down to the wire.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, that's fascinating. Thank you. I love thinking about that. Okay, so I've kept you all, because we had a funny false start and we started a little bit late, I've kept you both a little bit late, and I want to be respectful of your time. Thank you both for being here. So I can think of two quick like lightning questions for you. So like, don't think, just answer, right? I may think of more as I'm doing this. What is, Graciela, let's start with you. And then Heather, it'll be your turn. What's the most often asked question of you?
Often asked question.
When somebody finds out you do what you do, what's the first question they always ask?
What am I thinking? Read my mind.
People ask me, can you heal me?
That's great. What's your favorite pool toy?
Flippers. Like, I couldn't think of the word. Flippers.
Unicorn inner tube.
Yeah, awesome. And favorite summertime beverage?
Ooh.
Lemonade.
Yeah, I was about, lemonade too. Yeah.
Yeah. Do you have a favorite recipe?
Wait. Also coconut, like a full coconut. Mm.
The actual coconut, like drinking it.
Right the other one, coconut.
That's intense. I remember going to a Cambodian restaurant in San Francisco years ago, and a friend took me there and he said, have you ever had Cambodian food? And I was like, I don't think I have, oddly enough. And he was like, there's this fantastic place. And we walked in and he starts talking to the staff in Cambodian, which I didn't know that this Caucasian man could do, but he did. And they had this quick conversation that sounded like anger. It was very abrupt and real direct, and they were all kind of furrowed brows. And this tiny little woman spun around and she spun back and she had a coconut in her hand and a machete, and she goes whack and chops the top off, sticks a bendy straw in it and hands it to me. And I was like, wow, it was so aggressive for something that then ultimately is so happy and frivolous in a way.
Machetes and bendy straws come together usually. Really?
Wow. It was intense, and it was right in front of my eyes. It was literally inches from my face. I was frightened for my life for a moment, and then blissfully happy. Thank you. So, okay, we did not get to people's questions. So if people have questions for you, how can they connect with you? Graciela, can we start with you? How can people find you and connect with you?
Sure. So on Instagram, that's probably the best way to connect. It's Manifest Your Soul. And you can also find me on email. You can email me, Graciela Asher, Graciela B as in boy, Asher, ASHER @gmail.com.
Nice. All right,
And
Heather.
my email is love@heathercarlucci.com, and Instagram, always good, Heather Carlucci Medium.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. I feel like I could sit here and
you.
talk to you all day.
No.
I know. But, you know,
Maybe we have to do another one.
we do.
Yeah.
I'm gonna need to like get out of the sun for a minute. I'm feeling a little burned.
I'm parched.
Thank you so much. I look forward to doing this again sometime.
Let's do that. Why
Let's do it.
not? I got nowhere to go.
Yeah, me neither. I'm
Neither.
here at the pool.
Same.
Mwah, mwah, mwah.
Mwah.
Bye.
Thank you. Thank you for everybody online.
Thank you.
Thank you.